There are a surprising amount of Warhammer 40k branded games that come out year after year, and sadly, a lot of these games leave much to be desired. But what if we told you an indie studio got a bit of a Doom itch and slapped a fresh coat of Warhammer 40k paint all over it? Hey there friends, it's Livid here, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and today we are picking our contracts, hunting our targets, and collecting the bounties as we take a deep look at Necromunda, Hired Gun, and reveal if it's actually worth your time. The newest entry in this long list of games is made by Strumon Studio, an indie company who you might know from their previous title, Space Hulk Deathwing. Now, by no means do I consider that title a stellar game, and I actually think Necromunda Hired Gun is the game they've wanted to make all along. As a Warhammer 40k fan who has played a decent chunk of tabletop and nearly all the games that have been released, this one definitely sits somewhere in the upper middle on the bad to good scale. As a reference point, something like Space Marine or the original Dawn of War RTS games sit at the very top for me, while games like Fire Warrior most certainly sit down near the bottom. Now for those of you who don't know much about the Warhammer 40k universe, or maybe you just need a bit of a refresher, Hired Gun takes place on the hive world Necromunda, a billion-strong city sprawling in all directions, where the Imperium sanctions continuous production of resources and armaments for their ever-expanding military fleets. Now millions live and die here every day, scratching out a basic existence in a cutthroat, crime-ridden environment, one where most of the populace will never see the rest of their planet, with basic concepts such as the ground and sky being completely alien to them. Hired Guns navigate the endless sea of crime and corruption in an attempt to barely keep the balance in order. You'll take on the role as one of these hired guns, as you complete contracts, bank credits, and increase you and your Cyber Mastiff's already highly augmented systems to make your job just a bit easier. Now the game attempts to combine all the fun aspects of something like Doom and Dishonored, but being an indie title, it doesn't quite live up to the level of polish and enjoyment we've come to expect from those flagship games, which for a large number of people might be a bit of a downside. Now with a $40 price tag, it's basically a Doom-like game set in the Warhammer 40k universe. Where you fall with that initial knee-jerk reaction will either send you in the opposite direction or take you with us for a ride into this dark, gritty experience. Now the general game loop of Hired Gun looks a little bit like this. You'll begin everything from your home location, Martyr's End, complete with everything you expect from a hub location. You'll have access to various NPC vendors, such as the Rogue Dock, for making tier upgrades to your character in the form of new abilities, health, cooldown reductions, movement augments, and much more. You can also make bionic augments to your Cyber Mastiff as well, reducing this ever-present ability cooldown, making it more effective in spotting enemies, and overall being more useful in combat. Now the upgrade system for your Mastiff as well as your own skills and stats is well done in the fact that they give you a plethora of information to know exactly what each thing does. And overall, it isn't that expensive playing from start to finish of the story to get several things maxed out completely. The abilities and upgrades are also more meaningful than they seem, in that you will notice a difference in how fast your skills come off cooldown, their overall damage, and how long you're in the abilities before they enter that cooldown state. Some things even augment base gameplay mechanics. For instance, you can go from wall running being more of an escape or traversal skill in the beginning to one you actively use in combat with built-in aim assist to make you feel like an absolute badass. Hats off to the developers on this front. You'll also have access to a weapon vendor to buy minor weapon upgrades and sell loot you acquire during your missions. An artificer also exists at the very back of this area to offer you ways of fully upgrading your weapon piece by piece to make your weapons perform how you want them to. Finally, there is a bounty board which will house both your main story missions as well as side bounties of various tiers that you'll enter to earn credits to further your progression via the vendors we just mentioned. Now, prior to entering any mission, you'll have to look through your inventory, equip what you want to bring into that level as a loadout, and even purchase medkits, stims for revival on death, and even maps that help guarantee better loot from chests that you find during each run, helping alleviate what might sometimes be some bad RNG as you search for better and better gear. After all of that is taken care of, the action truly begins, and I have to say that the overall action is good, and being within the Doom-like genre, that's important. It's fast-paced, albeit not as polished as something like Doom, and at times can feel a little outdated. Enemies explode into glorious little bits, Your trigger finger is always itching for more, and there are some small, unique aspects to the game to let it really stand on its own, which is always a plus for a game in a fairly crowded genre like this. Now, one of the main reasons the action feels so good in Hired Gun is largely in part due to the level design actually being fantastic. Loot is hidden in treasure caches in various parts of each map, and really encourage exploration to find them, as you will often find yourself using all traversal options at your disposal to do so. They really embrace the verticality of a hive city in 40k lore as a core design aspect here, not just in exploration, but in combat as well, as you will run, grapple, and straight up leap from all the various platforms and geometry available to you in order to make your kills seamlessly. This 100% makes combat feel awesome, as you're moving at sometimes ludicrous speeds, raining down absolute hell on your enemies. Now the enemies, however, are a bit dumb in a lot of instances, feeling often older and outdated in terms of how they are designed and path to take you on. There are numerous opportunities to completely cheese entire encounters, because the AI tends to funnel itself into a single ladder, or doorway, or even just a hallway. Now while it's satisfying to see them all explode at once, do that enough times and well, it quickly loses that feel. Now speaking of raining down absolute hell on your enemies, let's double back and talk about the weapons in Hired Gun. Being in the Doom-like genre, having satisfying weapons is such an important part of the experience, and Hired Gun absolutely delivers here. There are a whole host of weapons at your disposal, from plasma pistols and bolters all the way to full-on autocannons. All of these weapons have a gratuitous amount of customization available to them, and each change in stat value actually matters. Just a slight shift in accuracy will have you needing to manage your recoil just a bit more to land those shots that might have been easier before swapping to a new part, and I love that. Each change to these components also visually changes your weapon, in addition to the large amount of skins that you can collect through playing. The weapon feedback and particle effects are also nothing short of spectacular. You can feel the visceralness of the 40k universe with each pull of your trigger, and each weapon performs how you think it would if you are familiar with Warhammer 40k. The sound design on these weapons is also incredible, and being so good, you'd think the sound design overall in the game would be a high point here. That, however, isn't the case, and it's one of our biggest gripes with Hired Gun. The overall sound design everywhere else just doesn't land. Music beats abruptly started and stopped in a really jarring way, and most of the ambient sounds in the game were almost non-existent. Now they have acknowledged that this is being looked into, but the overall experience was definitely affected by this. So much so that things like enemies sometimes couldn't even be heard approaching or engaging you, which is so critical to a game where you need to be aware of your enemies' locations before actually taking damage. I personally had several instances where enemies would just be on me without any warning they had spawned, and sometimes directly behind me, which is really unfortunate and certainly brings the overall experience a peg down. Now the voice acting is also just okay. It most certainly won't win any awards, but it's engaging enough and decently acted that I still enjoyed listening to the story rather than skipping through it. I also wouldn't be doing this review justice if I didn't point out a few other things. Now first off, I crashed several times, 5 to be exact, on a really updated gaming rig. Now, I didn't experience frame drops at all, but the crashes, like I mentioned, certainly disrupted my time with the game, often making me restart entire levels. Now additionally, the melee kill animations, I think, are absolutely awful. Very rarely will one go off without a hitch, but for the most part, either the beginning or ends get absolutely truncated, and you snap back into the world, and it's incredibly jarring. So much so that I never wanted to actually put myself in a position to do so if I could avoid it. And that's a real shame, because artists definitely put a fair amount of time into these different kill animations. Now lastly, the A, B, and S bounty missions are also almost all pretty awful. You'll revisit the same locations for the most part that you did in the story, and just go around clearing out enemies. Some of the worst culprits are the missions that you have to go around killing a certain number of leaders, and it often has you doubling back over yourself, turning a 5-minute mission into something unnecessarily longer. It doesn't really bring a unique enjoyableness that it should to make you want to do these over and over. Being that they are somewhat core to your progression after the main story for upgrading your stats and your Cybermassive, they really feel like a slog and kind of an afterthought. So here's the deal with Necromunda Hired Gun. The combat is enjoyable, the weapons are incredibly satisfying, And the story, while roughly only 10 to 12 hours long, is a nice venture into the grittiness of the Warhammer 40k universe. Now, if you're a fan of this style of shooter, there are probably more good things going on with this game than there are bad, by a pretty far margin. So at this point, I think it's safe to say that yes, Necromunda Hired Gun is worth your time. It's a little rough around the edges, but if you can look past some of those points, you'll find one of the more enjoyable Warhammer 40k games out there. It stays incredibly true to the lore that has long been established for this IP, and it doubles down on making sure the tabletop experience is in a way replicated through the traversal and gang warfare that makes up the Necromunda tabletop game. Plus, it's just an enjoyable experience to blast through tons of enemies when you have the time. Now, we hope this video helped you figure out if Necromunda Hired Gun is worth your time. If you enjoy this series and want more worth your time videos in your feed, go ahead and hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing to Legacy Gaming. Now, if you choose to pick it up, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the game, either in the comments below or head on over to our Discord. Our community of nearly 7,000 members is spread across dozens of fantastic games. So if you're looking for some awesome people to hang out with, stay up to date on our videos, consider becoming part of the Legacy. Finally, if you like our channel and are a fan of what we stand for here at Legacy Gaming, you can help us out by becoming a member. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you're helping evolve the channel and build a better community. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Livid, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.